In 1944, German engineering achieved what seemed impossible. They created a tank destroyer without flaws, faster than the Tiger, lower than the Panther, and more lethal than both combined. Its frontal armor, angled to perfection, made it virtually immune to Allied guns. British tankers who encountered this beast in Normandy called engaging it suicide. But this perfection came with a price tag Germany could no longer afford. This weapon demanded fuel that didn't exist, spare parts from factories reduced to rubble, and elite crews who lay dead in the frozen fields of Russia. The Germans built a Ferrari for a war being won by tractors. This is the story of how the pursuit of perfection can become strategic failure. The story of the Jagdpanther, a machine that killed enemies by the dozen, yet died from the wear of a single gear. To understand the paradox of this engineering triumph, we must go back 3 years, to the moment when German shells first bounced off Soviet armor with a helpless clang. Summer 1941, the opening weeks of Operation Barbarossa. German anti-tank gunners encountered an enemy no pre-war doctrine had predicted. The 37mm rounds that had pierced Polish and French armor weeks earlier now ricocheted off the sloped plates of Soviet T-34s with impotent clangs. The infantry quickly nicknamed their own guns door knockers. They made plenty of noise but were utterly useless. Worse still came the heavy KV tanks, whose frontal armor could resist even 50mm shells. The only salvation were the anti-aircraft guns, those same 88mm cannons designed to shoot down high-altitude bombers. Positioned horizontally, they could penetrate any Soviet tank at 1,500 meters. A 10-kilogram shell left the barrel at 800 meters per second, and no sloped armor could save you from a hit like that. But this solution had a cost. The anti-aircraft gun weighed over 4 tons. Its crew numbered 11 men. It took several minutes to deploy and became a fixed target before it could fire a third shot. This still worked in defense, but an advancing army needed something entirely different. An armored, mobile platform capable of delivering the 88's devastating power while moving, maneuvering, and surviving. The Wehrmacht would get such a machine, but first, Reich engineers would create 2 monsters that devoured their own crews. The first answer was the Ferdinand, a 70-ton armored colossus, born from Ferdinand Porsche's design genius and the Reich's production logic. When Porsche's heavy tank project lost the competition to Henschel's machine, 90 already built chassis sat unused. The solution was found quickly: install a powerful 88mm gun on them, cover them with 200mm frontal armor, and send them to the front. Near Kursk, in summer 1943, the Ferdinands destroyed hundreds of Soviet tanks. But the price of these victories was monstrous. The vehicles broke down during marches, caught fire from overheating electric transmissions, and got stuck at every crossroads because no field bridge could support their weight. And the worst was revealed in battle. The designers had provided no machine gun. The Ferdinand was invulnerable to tanks, but Soviet infantry pelted it with grenades, smoked out the crews, and killed them through observation slits. General Guderian called it hunting quail with siege cannons. The second attempt was the Nashorn, the exact opposite: a light chassis, an open cabin, and the same 88mm gun. The vehicle weighed half what the Ferdinand did and could keep pace with tank columns, but the 4-man crew sat behind armor only finger-thick, exposed to the sky and shrapnel. Any mortar, any fighter bomber was a death sentence. Excessive power killed your own soldiers. Excessive lightness protected no one. By autumn 1943, Germany needed a third way, a vehicle that combined the Ferdinand's firepower with the mobility and protection of a medium tank. By autumn 1943, the answer already existed: a machine that 1 year later would burn 11 British tanks in 2 minutes of combat. October 20th, 1943. At the Arras Proving Grounds in East Prussia, 3 full-scale wooden mock-ups were presented to Hitler. One depicted the super-heavy King Tiger. The second was the gigantic Jagdpanther tank destroyer. The third looked more modest, but it was this one that captured the Führer's attention most. It was a project that Daimler-Benz engineers had been working on for nearly a year. The task was simple: take the proven Panther chassis, mount a long-barreled 88mm gun on it, and protect it all with armor capable of withstanding enemy fire. The result exceeded expectations. Instead of a turret, The designers created a low-profile armored superstructure that integrated seamlessly with the vehicle's hull. The 80mm thick frontal plate was positioned at 55 degrees from vertical, and this changed everything. A horizontally flying projectile didn't encounter 80mm of steel, but nearly 140mm. The gun mantlet was cast from solid metal 100mm thick. The gun was the same as the King Tiger's, a Pak 43 with a barrel length of 71 calibers. The projectile's muzzle velocity exceeded 1,000 meters per second. At distances up to 900 meters, the trajectory remained almost flat. The gunner rarely had to adjust for range. The armor-piercing round penetrated 165 millimeters of steel at 1 kilometer. No Allied tank had such protection, not even on the drawing board. At the same time, the vehicle weighed 46 tons, 24 tons less than the Ferdinand. Its 700 horsepower Maybach engine allowed it to reach 46 kilometers per hour on highways. The crew consisted of 5 men, a commander, a gunner, a loader, a driver mechanic, and a radio operator who also served as the bow machine gunner. Hitler immediately approved the project. Moreover, he personally named the vehicle. No bureaucratic indices, no complicated designations, just Jagdpanther, the hunting panther. Production would begin 3 months later at the Braunschweig factory. The plan was to produce 150 vehicles per month. These figures remained on paper. In January 1944, the first 5 Jagdpanthers rolled off the Braunschweig factory assembly line. In February, there were 7. In March, 8. Instead of 150 vehicles per month, Reich Industry was producing 5, 7, barely enough to equip a single division. The problem wasn't in the design. Armored hulls were delivered regularly from the Brandenburg Ironworks factory, 30, 40, 50 pieces per month. But each Jagdpanther required precision assembly, skilled workers, and rare components. Worst of all, the Braunschweig factory was within range of Allied bombers. In 1944, the city was bombed 40 times. The factory was hit directly 10 times. In October, a particularly effective raid destroyed 60% of production facilities. The gap between plan and reality was over 500 vehicles, enough for 12 complete divisions. In June 1944, when the Allies landed in Normandy, the Wehrmacht had 46 Jagdpanthers ready, 46 vehicles for the entire Western Front. By comparison, over 10,000 Stug assault guns were produced during the war. The ratio was 1 flawless Predator for every 25 workhorses. But there was a problem worse than the vehicle shortage: the people shortage. Tank schools that in 1941 took months to train crews now trained them in weeks. 17-year-old boys sat at the controls of machines that demanded skill and experience. Major Karl-Heinz Nock, who in spring 1944 accepted the 1st Jagdpanthers into his 654th Heavy Panzerjäger Battalion, knew this better than anyone. His men had fought at Kursk and Ferdinands, survived the nightmare of retreat, and seen the best equipment destroyed by inexperienced hands. Now they had to prove the new machine could change the course of battle. Oberleutnant Friedrich Lüders, commander of the 2nd Company, was assigned 12 Jagdpanthers with orders to defend the Kalmont sector. Only weeks remained until a battle that would go down in history. July 30th, 1944. British forces launched Operation Bluecoat, an attack south of Kalmont to support the American breakthrough on the western flank of the Normandy beachhead. The 3rd Battalion, Scots Guards Armored, received orders to capture Hill 226 near the village of Lolori, a few kilometers behind German positions. Several dozen Churchills moved along a country road between hedgerows, precisely that bocage that transformed Normandy into a labyrinth of green walls and blind curves. 3 Jagdpanthers from Lüders' company waited in camouflaged positions. The vehicle's low silhouettes blended with the embankments and bushes. The British didn't notice their presence until the lead tank burst into flames. What happened next lasted about 2 minutes. The 88mm rounds pierced the Churchill's frontal armor like paper. British tankers didn't even have time to understand where the fire was coming from. Major Sidney Cuthbert, the battalion's second-in-command, turned his vehicle toward the threat and attempted to return fire. His tank was one of the first casualties. Charles Farrell, a tanker from the same battalion, later recalled, "His tank split in two. The turret flew off and the entire crew, including himself, burned to death. Lord William Griffith of the Welsh Guards was in another sector, but what he saw remained etched in his memory for decades. Against the background of the road behind us appeared the silhouette of what seemed to be the largest tank I had ever seen. It turned out to be a German Jagdpanther, and the barrel of its gun seemed to stretch endlessly toward us, further and further. When the smoke cleared, 11 British tanks were burning on the road. 24 guardsmen had been killed in those 2 minutes. German losses amounted to 2 Jagdpanthers, both disabled by damaged tracks and abandoned by their crews. By day's end, the count had risen to 14 destroyed Churchills. On September 30th, 1944, Oberleutnant Friedrich Lüders received the Knight's Cross for his fighting in Normandy, the only Jagdpanther commander to receive this decoration. But by that point, his company no longer existed. In the days following the triumph at Lillory, Allied aircraft systematically destroyed all remaining Jagdpanthers of the 654th Battalion. Typhoon fighter bombers hunted German armored vehicles from above, where neither armor slope nor gun power offered any advantage. Not a single vehicle from the division crossed the Seine during the general retreat from Normandy. In September, the 654th had to be withdrawn to the rear for reorganization. Of the complete unit, only the crews remained, without their vehicles. This wasn't a judgment on the vehicle, but on the entire system that created it. The Jagdpanther had proven invincible in battle, but battle was only a small part of war. Between battles, the vehicle had to be serviced, repaired, refueled, resupplied with ammunition, and evacuated if it broke down. And here, perfection became a curse. The main problem was the side transmissions, precisely those components that transmitted power from the engine to the tracks. The French Panther 1947 report, compiled based on post-war testing, recorded devastating statistics. The Maybach engine could last 1,500 kilometers, the side gears only 150. The Jagdpanther stopped not because it ran out of fuel, but because mechanisms wore out 10 times faster than designers had predicted. The situation was aggravated by the Hunter's design itself. The gun in the fixed superstructure could only traverse 12 degrees left and right. To aim the gun at a target outside this sector, you had to turn the entire vehicle. Every turn stressed the side gears. Every battle involved hundreds of these turns. There were no spare parts. There was a catastrophic shortage of recovery equipment capable of towing a 46-ton vehicle. By January 1945, fuel had become a luxury. The formula for the end was simple. A Jagdpanther whose side transmission failed in the middle of a retreat was doomed. Abandoning such a vehicle to the enemy meant giving them a technological advantage. The only option left was to destroy it with your own hands. That's why in the reports of the 559th Heavy Panzerjäger Battalion, losses caused by their own crews exceeded enemy-inflicted losses by a factor of 12. Of the 413 Jagdpanthers built, only a few survived the war, and each has its own story. About 10 survive to this day. 4 of them are still operational. One of these vehicles is displayed at Bovington, Britain's main tank museum. Its story seems like war's irony. When British troops occupied a factory in Hanover in May 1945, they found several unfinished hulls on the assembly line. Instead of sending them for scrap, Command ordered German workers to complete assembly under military engineers' supervision. That's how the last Jagdpanthers were born. Vehicles assembled by the defeated country for the victors, so they could study the enemy they hadn't managed to defeat in open combat. Another vehicle belongs to the Wheatcroft collection. Mechanic Mike Gibb, who drove it for hundreds of kilometers during tests and demonstrations, debunked the main myth about the Jagdpanther's unreliability. The vehicle works perfectly if cared for by an experienced crew, he explained to historian James Holland. The problem in 1944 wasn't the hardware. The problem was the people the Reich no longer had. In July 2019, near the village of Lillory, a memorial was unveiled dedicated to the fallen guardsmen. The bronze plaque bears the names of Major Sidney Cuthbert, Sergeant Andrew Hay, and 22 other British tankers who died on July 30th, 1944. Several relatives attended the ceremony, including granddaughters of those who burned to death in their Churchill tanks during a 2-minute battle with 3 German vehicles. The very concept of the tank destroyer didn't long survive the war. Post-war armies experimented with similar vehicles, the Swedish Stridsvagn 103 and the British projects of the 1970s. But ultimately, the turret prevailed. Flexibility proved more important than ideal armor angles. The Jagdpanther's story tells how you can win every battle and still lose the war. German designers created a vehicle without obvious flaws. It had the perfect balance of armor, firepower, and mobility. Its gun could penetrate any enemy tank. Its silhouette allowed it to disappear on the battlefield. Its protection turned frontal assaults into suicide for the attacker. Yet precisely this perfection became a strategic trap. While Germany built 413 flawless Predators, America produced 49,000 Shermans. They weren't the best, they weren't perfect, but they were sufficient, and sufficient in number. In a war of attrition, quantity wins by a landslide. A lost Sherman could be replaced in a week. A lost Jagdpanther disappeared forever, along with the crew that had been trained for months, along with irreplaceable parts, along with fuel that was scarce even for retreat. The Jagdpanther remained a monument to engineering genius and simultaneously a warning. In war, as in life, the pursuit of perfection can become a form of defeat. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the one that can't be beaten, it's the one that can't be lost.